Buccaneers and Buccarinas, my name is Captain Hearthstone, and it's time to take on the League of Evil! Or the League of Explorers if you're doing it the other way, because the new adventure is here! So, I figured I would just take a little bit of time because it's a nice, relaxing kind of day. The sun is shining, the birds are singing, Galakrond is awake. Galakrond is awake. Oh, okay then. Nothing unusual there. We're all gonna die. But anyways, besides from that, the new adventures just come out, so we've got Galakrond's Awakening on the scene. We got access to the first chapter for free, but if you wanted to pre-order the, rest of it, if you've got it the pre-order, or if you want to buy the whole adventure, it's only 20 bucks. It's really not that bad. You get a bunch of new cards that you can use in all your other decks. But I figured the best thing I could talk about with regards to all this, outside of all of the new fancy cards you could possibly get in all this, is actually talk about beating heroic mode, because during the normal solo adventure you're able to basically beat all the bosses so easily because you have these pre-built decks based on the story characters that you will play as throughout either one of the routes, whether it's the League of Explorers or the League of Evil. So, not really that big of a deal, but the heroic mode is a lot more like old-fashioned adventure mode, where you have to play one of your own specific decks against different bosses that you encounter throughout the adventure. It's a little bit different in that regard. So, because you don't have as many overpowered combos and the bosses are even more powerful, it can be a little difficult and a little daunting. But I wanted to share my own strategies that I was able to use, because I've already beaten the heroic versions of all the bosses on the two routes so far, until next week comes around, and the week after, and the week after. You know how it is. So, how do you beat the bosses of the Explorers route and the Evil route? Well, actually, I really only had to use two different decks for it. So, pretty much here was my general strategy, and I'm going to throw up a deck list here so that way you guys can not only use these for your own decks, but the best part is these are actually all standard legal decks, which means you can play with these in standard right now, if you wanted to. So, consider this a nice, fun little video where I get to showcase a couple of my decks, and you can use them to take on the League of Evil in heroic mode, or, you can use it to beat other players up. I don't know. It's up to you. So, the big deck that I ended up using, that I used to defeat the first and the third bosses on both of these runs, was actually Highlander Hunter. And this is a deck that I've actually been a big fan of since Saviors of Old Doom, because, well, you have some really powerful cards in Highlander Hunter. I use a lot of secrets in the deck, so I actually run Face Stalker from the new Descent of Dragons, as well as Subject 9 all the way from back in Boon's Day. Subject 9 being one of my personal favorite cards in the game. So, you pretty much run a lot of the good secrets, you play Face Stalker, so that way when you use your hero power, you can easily just get a secret out. How hard is that? Then you can draw out the rest of the secrets when you draw your Subject 9, which is always pretty good. I also run a small dragon package in the deck, which includes Primordial Explorer, Uranus, and probably most importantly, Stormhammer. Stormhammer basically is a 3-2 weapon that doesn't lose any durability as long as you control a dragon, which between Primordial Explorer, Uranus, and of course Dragon Queen Alexstrasza, you're gonna have a dragon pretty often when you get to this. If you also run Eaglehorn Bow in this deck, as well as Hyena Alpha to capitalize off of your secrets. So, definitely a really strong deck. The whole point of this is just to basically play tit for tat on your opponent. You keep control of the board, you just run over through their minions, and it ends up working out pretty well in my thoughts. So, at least in my experiences, I was able to beat the bosses within 1 or 2 tries. Except for 2 of the bosses. The second bosses of each run. In the Explorer's route, this takes the form of the Avalanche Elemental, where normally you'll have access to Khadgar, who has some really powerful stuff. Like, he's got a 0 mana, gain 5 crystals kind of card. He can summon his elementals, which duplicate the effects of his spells, you know, for each elemental he's got on the field, and he's got stuff that basically gives him like spell damage +5 for the turn. So Khadgar's in a really good position to take on a boss that has 150 health, and that can also duplicate minions. When I started taking on the heroic version of this, it was a lot harder because, well, for starters, 150 health is now a lot to go through. Not to mention the Avalanche Elemental can duplicate any minion, although the new minion will be silenced. And probably the biggest, hardest part about this is that he's running giants. And I'm talking about like Mountain Giant and more specifically, Molten Giant. Molten Giant is really, really easy for this guy to get out, since all he has to do is take 20 points of damage, which out of 150 hit points doesn't really put you in a bad spot. And then he's just getting free 8/8s to just run about. Shrivala in the evil route is very similar in this regard, except that instead of 0 mana 8/8s because of such a massive health pool, Shrivala actually has a hero power that only costs 1. In the normal route it costs 3 and summons a 4/4 elemental that comes into play frozen. But in the heroic version, the same hero power only costs 1. The minion still comes into play frozen, but it's also running Living Dragon Breath, which basically means that suddenly becomes a 1 mana 4/4 that can attack on the next turn as opposed to 2 turns later. So it can really, no pun intended, snowball into a really dangerous situation when you kind of get in that regard. So what deck could I possibly run to take on the heroic versions of these guys? And the deck I went with is actually a Warlock deck that runs the quest Supreme Archaeology. Now, Supreme Archaeology basically allows you to get a new hero power after you've drawn 20 cards, which is very easy for Warlock to do, thanks to his hero power that draws you a card and costs you 2 life, as well as 2 mana, but also runs Plot Twist, which allows you to shuffle your hand back into your deck and draw again. Pretty simple, right? Well, the real kicker is that this is actually going to lead into a specific combo that you'll want the new quest hero power to work with. So with Supreme Archaeology, you basically just draw a bunch of cards, and then with this deck, you're actually playing more of a control Warlock. So you're basically keeping tabs on the board, you're running stuff like Rotten Apple Bomb and Cartoon Defender, which will allow you to survive for a long period of time, so that way you don't have to worry about dying anytime soon. And because these minions have Taunt, they have Life Restoration for your health, and then you've got other cards to just kind of control the board, such as Plague of Flames, which kills all your minions, which luckily a lot of your minions dying isn't a problem. You've got Hellfire for smaller minions, and if the board gets really egregious, then you got Twisting Nether, which is really, really good. But the whole point of this deck is actually to get a 0 mana Glinda Crowskin. And the reason we're trying to get a 0 mana Glinda Crowskin is so we can play her down alongside Mogu Cultist. Glinda Crowskin gives your minions in your hand Echo, and playing Mogu Cultist is pretty much your means of getting to the real main boss of this deck, Highkeeper Ra. So if you play 7 Mogu Cultists onto the field all at once, they'll all combine together to form Highkeeper Ra, which will then be a 10 mana 20/20 that deals 20 damage to all enemies at the end of each turn. So you can wipe out boards of 8/8s, and you can wipe out your opponent's life total very quickly with this. So, you play Glinda Crowskin for 0 mana, and then you play Mogu Cultist until the board is completely filled up. That's pretty much the strategy. But wait a minute, I hear you say. Well, how are you going to play 7 Mogu Cultists when after you played 6 Mogu Cultists with your Glinda Crowskin, your board is completely filled? Well, that's where you have to run something like Grim Rally, which this is the current standard legal Warlock spell that you can use for this. Basically, with Grim Rally, you'll be able to destroy Glinda Crowskin, which will allow you to play your last remaining Echo copy of Mogu Cultist, which will then allow them to combine together to form Highkeeper Ra, and you'll be fine in you'll be in a pretty good position. There's not a whole lot the bosses can do after that. You're dealing 20 damage to everything they have. That's all their minions and to their face. In the case of the Avalanche Elemental, that basically means they're losing 40 health every single turn. 20 from you attacking them with Highkeeper Ra, and another 20 from Ra's own effect going off. You're wiping out their board every single turn, so they can't keep a board of 8/8s around, and you'll win pretty quickly after you get to Highkeeper Ra. It took me a couple of tries just because the boss ended up in a very good position the first time around, but once I was able to get the combo off, it was easy. no problem in either case, whether I was the Avalanche Elemental or Trvala. But that's pretty much how I went about it. If you want to get a copy of the deck codes, I'm going to leave them in the description, and until next week, I guess we'll see what's going to happen in the next stuff, because, geez, I don't know where the adventure's going to go from here. I don't know what the new boss is going to be, and I don't really know what new cards we're going to get. I mean, I know all the cards in this point, but I don't know when we're getting all these different cards. Like Sky Captain Krug! Oh, the pirates are back, they're doing the thing, the pirates are back. We are the pirates.